Welcome and thank you for standing by. All participants are in a listen-only mode for the duration of today's webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and may be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the session over to your host, Deb. Deb, you may begin.
Great, thank you so much. Well, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar event, Mastering Economic Data Searches on data.census.gov. My name is Deb Rivera and I will be your host for today's event, where our presenter will show you essential search and filtering techniques to help you find economic data on the Census Bureau's main data search platform, data.census.gov. Now, before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me today and helping to support our speaker. Now, I am going to turn things over to our presenter in just a moment, but I have a few housekeeping items to share. I would like to encourage you all to make use of the Q&A panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the webinar. The question and answer panel is located along the right side of your WebEx screen. It should be on the bottom right-hand side. Now, we do have a team of panelists joining us today ready to answer questions that you may have related to today's topic. So if you have any questions related to searching for economic data on data.census.gov, please submit them through the Q&A panel. And at the end of the webinar, we will go over some of those questions that were submitted through the Q&A panel. A quick note on the question and answer session, we will focus on the platform data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on the topic of economic data, the collection process, methodology, or other census products. Finally, we are recording the webinar today, and all the materials for this training will be available through the Census Academy website, and we will be sure to share that link with you guys. Now, welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Tyson Weister. Welcome, Tyson.
Thanks, Deb, and thank you all so much for joining the webinar this afternoon, Mastering Economic Data Searches on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work on the communications team for data.census.gov. So we're going to focus today primarily on how to go about navigating data.census.gov to access the economic data. I'm going to do this through a series of live demonstration, and then we're also going to have different tips and tricks peppered in throughout the presentation. So I'll be flipping back and forth between the slides and the live site. And then of course, afterwards, we'll talk about some resources for you to learn more and stay connected. Now, before we get into the live demonstration, I just wanted to take a moment to focus on what is available through data.census.gov. So hopefully you're familiar with the site already. We are the primary platform to access data from the Census Bureau. Most people know us for counting the population every 10 years, but we also conduct 130 different surveys and programs. Being the primary platform, it means that we have the most popular data from different surveys and programs, not necessarily every one of the 130, but the most popular of them. And when we're thinking about business and economic data, my colleague here has put together a slide that showcases the different data sets available to you and over which time periods. So generally speaking, you'll see data potentially as early as 2012 from these economic data sets up through the most recent releases. And some of the popular data sets include the economic census, the annual county business patterns survey, the annual business survey, and non-employer statistics. Note that there are lots of other data sets detailed here. For the purpose of today's demonstration, I'm focusing on how to navigate to the different data, not necessarily on educating the ins and outs of differences between these surveys and programs, but we do have many different types of trainings and educational resources available. So if you're interested in learning more about the data sets themselves, I would recommend browsing through Census Academy. All right, so with that background information, the focus for today is for you all to leave the session and feeling comfortable being able to access business data using the single and advanced search on data.census.gov, being able to select filters for different NAICS industry codes and economic data sets. We'll spend quite a bit of time showing how to read and customize the table layout. And then we'll show how to visualize the data through maps, brand new charts, and how to save your results. So going into the site, we want to make sure that you all are familiar with the core concept. There are two ways that you can go about doing searches on data.census.gov. I'm going to show you the single search bar first. I like to try it out really quickly to see if I can find an answer to my data question. And what works well in the single search bar is to type in keywords and phrases, specifically if you have a topic, geography, year, table ID, or NAICS industry code. So for this example, I'm going to do two searches, one first for grocery stores, and we'll explore some of the table results. And then I'm going to fine tune that a little bit and search for NAICS 4451 in Texas. So going here to the live site, I'm going to go to data.census.gov. And right here, you see the single search bar first thing. So here's where I'm going to go ahead and type in my keyword, grocery stores, and press enter. Do keep in mind when you type something in the single search bar, we are making our one best guess for what we think you mean. So I always recommend to data users, look in the upper left. You may need to click the filters button to expand the panel, but take a look at the results in the filter panel to see if this is consistent with what you've typed in, or if it's conflicting, you may want to revisit and edit your search. But in this case, it's a nice match between the NAICS code for grocery stores, and the all results page lists a number of different tables to choose from. I like to drill directly into the tables, so I don't spend a lot of time on the all results page. I'll go ahead and click the tables at the top. This tells us that there are 151 table results for this NAICS code corresponding to grocery stores. So it may seem overwhelming, especially if you haven't used the economic or business data much on the site, but I want to show you some ways that you can go about scanning through this list. So what it's giving you are the first 10 tables, and then you can page through the different results. So because there's 151 in this list of results, what I like to do just below that list of the number of results, you'll see it's set to the default of 10. You can increase this to show up to 50 tables at a time. It makes it a lot easier to scan through longer lists quickly and reduces the number of pages that you need to click through. So the other thing that I'll mention is that your results are typically ordered so that the most recent data tend to appear at the top of the list of results. So you'll notice that all of your tables at the top come from the 2022 vintage. And eventually it will switch over to 2021 vintage and so on. So after you know the most recent data are at the top, you'll also be able to see that they are ordered within each of these year sections. The tables are listed in alphanumeric order. So there are characters for each of these table IDs. So that's what it's being ordered by. And what I wanted to point out here is that I certainly wouldn't expect you to be an expert in knowing what each character of these table IDs mean, but the first 2 to 3 characters will tell you the different survey or program that it comes from. So the way I read this, AB tells me the data comes from the annual business survey. Scrolling down, we see several tables that start with BDS. Those come from Business Dynamics Statistics. CB for County Business Patterns. EC for Economic Census. IA for Economic Census of Island Areas. And NS for the non-employer statistics. And then once we get to the end, it goes to the 2021 tables. So just wanted to point that out as a tip, that you can see those tables grouped in meaningful ways. I'm going to click here just on this county business patterns table and take a quick look at this before we move on to our next search. Again, this is an annual survey that provides key information about businesses. And when we look at the first row at the top, we can see data for grocery stores, and it's providing all establishments. And because we didn't specify geography, it defaults to the US. When you get to the right side of these economic tables is where you see the data values that are provided for this particular context. So this tells me that there were 99,073 grocery stores in the United States with paid employees. And then it gives me the additional data points: annual payroll, first quarter payroll, number of employees. We're going to take a look in future examples in this demonstration about diving into all of the content of the table and customizing that view. But I wanted to go back here to my next search. So I showed you how you could search by keyword. We're now going to search by the NAICS 4451 in Texas. So I'm going to click the US Census logo in the upper left. I'm going to type in 4451 and Texas. Press enter. Remember, we make our one best guess when you use the single search. So look in the upper left and it very seamlessly recognized 4451 as the industry code I was searching for. The first time we used the phrase grocery stores, you can certainly use the actual industry code as well. The other option was Texas, which interpreted that part of the phrase correctly as well. So clicking back into tables, in this case, we can see that once we go down to the state level, we get 50 fewer table results for this particular NAICS industry code, 101 results instead of 151. And then you'll notice that they're ordered very similarly to what you saw before, with the most recent on top and then alphanumerically within. Sorry about that. All right, so going back here to the PowerPoint slide, I wanted to transition. We're going to use the advanced search filters for the rest of the demonstrations today. The single search bar is a nice starting point, but I like the advanced search for a few reasons. One, it's a guided approach. I'll click and explore different words and phrases that pique my interest without having to come up with the words on my own. I'll ultimately be looking for one or more checkboxes as a final search selection, rather than relying on the Census Bureau to interpret the text I put in exactly as I intended. And the advanced search is also helpful because it includes access to all available search options, including detailed codes and geographies. For this example, we are going to take a deeper look at the table content, and I wanted you to understand the difference between data variables in economic tables and dimensions in economic tables. This is going to help you not only in understanding the table themselves, but also when you go into mapping and charts. So it's going to build off of the process of our demonstration. Data variables are the primary values that you see for a table, things like number of firms, number of establishments, sales, payroll, number of employees. They can be continuous or categorical variables. The key thing is that you'll notice for economic data sets, they're always going to be right aligned. So notice here, the column header is right aligned and the individual data values in the cell are also right aligned. So any column that is right aligned is a data variable. They are grouped together and they appear also on the right side of the table. So that tells you the potential data points that you can get. And the dimensions will tell you the different contexts that you'll be getting the data for. So dimensions are categorical variables always. They provide the context to fully qualify what each data variable represents. And every unique combination of a dimension category is a data row in the table. So in this table, we can see there's 3 rows for Anderson County. They look very similar until you get to this meaning of tax status code. You can see that there's 1 row for all establishments in Anderson County without regard to whether that establishment has federal income tax or is exempt. The second row is only for establishments subject to federal income tax. And then the third row is the businesses that are exempt. So again, each unique combination of your dimensions will result in a data row in the table. And it's very easy to visually see which ones are dimensions because they are left aligned, not right aligned like the data variables. And again, you'll see both the column header is left aligned and the cells. So let's take a look at this table in detail. For this example, I'm going to use the filters and compare a data value across geographies. We're going to look at the number of establishments for NAICS code 62. That represents the healthcare and social assistance sector. And we're going to look across all counties using data from the economic census, and that'll be all counties in Tennessee. So back here on the live site, I'm going to click the US Census logo in the upper left. I'm going to choose Advanced Search. And on the left-hand side is where we see our filters. We use Advanced Search and filters interchangeably. There's high-level categories, geographies, topics, years, surveys, and codes. So I'm actually going to select the codes first. You'll see there's a few different options to choose from. Almost all of them are for economic data. The first one is the most popular industry codes, NAICS. And as I'm navigating through this panel, I'm going to click on different words and phrases. If it's a checkbox, it's a final selection, and any words and phrases that do not have checkboxes will give me more detailed options to choose from. So I can see here there is 6.2 healthcare and social assistance. So I'll click there, and I need to also make sure to mark the checkbox in order to register that as a final selection. If you wanted to dive in more detail to a more specific type of business within this, you could certainly drill in and select other detailed checkboxes. I'm going to keep it high level and just stick with the overall healthcare and social assistance sector. Next, we'll select our geography. So in the left-hand side, you can see different common geographies to choose from. So I'm going to choose county and follow the prompts. So it's going to be asking me here for the state. And as you make selections, the site is making sure that it's only providing you with details that are compatible with what you've already selected. So once you make your first selection, additional selections in the panel may take a little bit longer because it's hiding things from your view that are not compatible with the industry code 6.2 selection. So following those prompts, I chose county, Tennessee, and all counties within Tennessee. While I'm here, I just wanted to mention a tip. On the left-hand side where you see all geographies, there's over 240 different levels of geography you can choose from at the Census Bureau. Most of those are compatible with decennial census and American Community Survey data. A handful of them are compatible with economic data. So if you're ever having trouble finding your geography, if you click all geographies and summary levels, because we already selected the NAICS 6.2 filter, the site is just showing us those handful of geographies that are compatible with business data for this particular filter. And of note here, we get lots of users using our demographic data. A couple key differences between business data, geography selections, and demographic. The business data uses actual zip codes, so 5-digit zip code. The business data also uses a geography called economic place. So they do not use zip code tabulation area or place. It is 5-digit zip code and economic place. And then the last thing I wanted to do with this demonstration, I have my NAICS and my geography, is select the economic census. So on the left-hand side, we can see under surveys, there's economic census, core statistics, and then it gives me the option to choose the data set for 2022 or the previous 2017. Here I've clicked the most recent. If you didn't know up front that you wanted data from the economic census or what the different data sets are called, there's also these topics, and I would invite you to explore the business and economy topics and search by those words rather than survey filters if you aren't familiar with them already. So once you're ready, I have industry code, geography, and data set. I'll click search in the lower right and tables at the top. Currently, there are 2 tables available for this combination of filters. I'm going to take a look at the first one, EC 2200 Basic. It comes from the Economic Census, all sectors summary statistics for the US, states, and selected geographies. You can, by the way, I've been doing this without verbalizing it, expand and collapse these panels to use your screen as you see fit. So if you want more space on your screen devoted to the table view, you might want to go ahead and collapse those 2 panels. I always like to scroll right to left and look at the columns here. We see there are a number of left-aligned columns on the left side of the table. Those are all of our dimensions. And then when I get to the right side of the table, I start to see right-aligned columns. This particular table provides variables for number of firms, establishments, sales, annual payroll, first quarter payroll, number of employees, and then some quality indicators to tell you a little bit more about the data itself. And notice here, there's 276 rows of data. And for my purpose, I just want to compare the data across each county in Tennessee without regard to whether the business is subject or exempt from federal income tax. So how would you go about simplifying the rows just to get one for each county? What you would want to do is use what we call custom filters. So when you hover over one of these column headers, you'll click those 3 horizontal bars, and then you get some options. When you click the filter button, you'll be able to select just the options that you'd like to keep. So here what I'll do is click select all, choose all establishments to keep that entry, and then I'm going to leave these 2 boxes unchecked. Now once I click apply, it's going to decrease from 276 rows all the way down to 95 rows, representing each of the 95 counties in Tennessee. Another thing you might want to do, notice as I scroll back to the right-hand side to view the variables, we have data that's representing 1 row per county, but we lose context of what these values represent as we scroll. You have the flexibility to choose to pin 1 or more columns in view so they stay in your view as you scroll right and left. The way you do that is hover over the column such as geographic area name. You'll see pin column, and then you can choose to pin it to the left or right side of your screen. And now as you scroll, you'll be able to keep that in view, make sense of the data. So here we can see there are 201 healthcare and social assistance establishments in Anderson County, Tennessee. And as we go down, we can see the data across each county. A couple other things you can do to customize your view here. You can, for any of the data variables, also apply filters to remove rows of the table that don't meet certain criteria. And because this is a data variable with a numeric value, you'll notice that there aren't checkboxes to choose from. You get different options to filter the data. So if, for instance, I wanted to keep data just for counties that had 50 or more healthcare or social assistance establishments, I would change this drop down to greater than or equals. I would type in 50. And as I typed that in, it already applied that filter in the background. So we went from our 95 rows of data down to the 51. So this represents the 51 counties in Tennessee that have 50 or more healthcare and social assistance establishments with paid employees. You can also click the column header. Here I've clicked it twice to sort the data in ascending or descending order. And we can see the counties in Tennessee that have the most establishments. Great, moving back here to the slides, we're going to proceed and build on this in the demonstration to show you how to visualize the data next. We talked about variables versus dimensions in tables. Let's talk about briefly how they show up in our maps. When you go to create a map, you'll see that data variables are in the first section at the top of the menu, and our maps support continuous variables. So you won't see those data quality indicators here, but you'll see all of the other right-aligned variables from your table. And your dimensions in the maps will populate through a series of drop-downs in a dimensions section just below the variables. So these populate automatically based on the dimensions that are applicable to the table that you're clicked into. So you'll just want to review the dimensions and make sure it's set to the context that you want displayed on your map. So let's see what this looks like in action. We'll go ahead and map out the number of establishments for NAICS 62 for all counties in Tennessee. Back here on the live site, all of the maps and charts on our site are based on the underlying data tables. So I always recommend creating a table first, or not creating, but viewing a table first, and then navigating to the map. So there's a couple different ways you can get there at this point. My favorite way is just to click the Maps tab at the top. From here, you'll want to make sure that you're still clicked into the table that has the data you want to make a map of. Here we can see the orange bar and shading for EC 2200 Basic. You'll also want to make sure that your map is set to your desired geographic level, and it's automatically zoomed us in here to counties in Tennessee. We can confirm county boundaries visually are being shown. We see it here in the legend, and it's also the layer. If you needed to change the layer manually, you do have that option here. But at this point, all we need to do is tell the system, out of all of the estimates that we just saw in that very large data table, which one do we want shown on our map and for what context. So you can adjust this by clicking in the upper left where it says number of firms. There is that section at the top that I mentioned. These are the data variables from the economic table. It has its own scroll bar. You also may find it helpful to adjust your zoom setting as you're making this selection. And by default, it was choosing the first one, which was number of firms, but we were looking at the second column, which was number of establishments. So once we click number of establishments, we see it's updated our map. The other thing that we would want to do is open up that variables menu again. At the bottom, you see the dimensions, and you'd want to make sure that this is set to the context that you are interested in. Here it has carried over that NAICS code 62 selection, and it's chosen all establishments for the other two dimensions. So it's giving us the total picture of NAICS code 62 businesses across each county in Tennessee. But if you wanted to start swapping this out and looking at the data across other types of businesses, some of that data are available to you as well. So let's click here back to 6.2 and take a look at our map. So this is showing us that counties in darker shades of blue have higher number of healthcare and social assistance establishments that have paid employees. As you zoom in, you'll start to see the different labels of these counties populate, as well as street lines and street labels, and you can click an individual county such as Davidson County and see that there are 2,312 establishments in NAICS 62. Great, so great to have that in a map format. In the last few months, we released new functionality that allows you to create custom charts from our tables. So I'm going to take a moment to chart this data out as well and show you how that functionality works. It's pretty similar to the map overall, and there's a few different ways to get there, but if you use the More Tools button at the top and then choose Chart, it's going to carry over all of the selections that you previously made in the map, including the fact that we chose number of establishments. Remember, the default was number of firms. So from here, we can see a bar chart showing these data across each county. You can choose to sort this in ascending or descending order. You can switch at the top between column charts and bar charts. And in some cases, if you're looking at time series data, you'll also see line charts available. Going back into this drop-down menu, your measures or variables are in the first section, and then the context is included below for these dimensions. Just to show you, there is some additional functionality to visualize things in a chart format that you can't do in the maps. So before I do that, I'm going to click here on filters at the top. You can choose additional geographies or NAICS codes to add in. So here I'll just choose to add in a few different NAICS codes into this analysis so we can see how this can be reflected in the chart. So right now it has added those as filters as if I had selected them in the filter panel. And it has chosen one to show in my chart. So it's now put this at the real estate and rental leasing businesses instead of social and healthcare businesses. You can see in the drop-down menu, the chart attribute has NAICS code. So because we made those additional selections just now for more than one NAICS code, we can choose which one we want shown on our chart. So if I change it back to healthcare and social assistance, we can see those businesses shown again. But the nice thing about the charts is you can show additional attributes all in one chart. So in the maps, you would only be able to show the data values across one specific context at a time. The charts have a primary attribute and a second attribute or a nested category to display. If you move NAICS code here, you'll be able to see all of the NAICS codes that you selected across the geographies here at once. Great, going to go back to my slides here and move on to another example before we start transitioning over to questions. I did want to take a moment to point out some additional information. Most data, including the economic census, county business patterns, and annual business survey data that I'm showing today, they cover businesses that have paid employees. So just keep in mind that for self-employed businesses, those would be part of non-employer statistics. And if you want a complete picture of business in an area, you would always want to combine the data from non-employer statistics with the data from economic census, county business patterns, or annual business survey. These data may or may not be meaningful to your analysis, so it's of course up to you if you feel you would need to access this data. But again, if you want a complete picture of businesses in an area, you would want to combine the data from both sources. The tables are laid out very similarly. The difference is you would check the box for economic survey and choose non-employer statistics to get to this table rather than the economic census box that we checked in our example. And then also with economic census, their data are being released on a staggered schedule. So I showed one of the tables that are currently available. Additional tables are slated to be released throughout the rest of this year and into 2026. So I just included a couple slides here with some details and links for you to learn more. Moving on to our next example, rather than look at comparisons across geographies. I want to compare a single geography and look at the different NAICS within the geography. So for this example, we're going to look at veteran-owned businesses across all two-digit NAICS codes in New York from the annual business survey. And the annual business survey provides characteristics of business owners. It breaks out demographics of the business owners by sex, race, ethnicity, veteran status, and a few other characteristics. So going back here to the live site, I'm going to start fresh from the census logo in the upper left. I'm going to use the advanced search again and select some filters. First, I like to start with my codes. If I'm working with economic data, I'll choose industry codes, NAICS. And I'm going to choose this checkbox that says two-digit NAICS. It allows me to choose all of these two-digit codes in one click. Next, I'll go ahead and choose state and New York. And then the last thing I'll do on the left is choose my survey filter. So it says economic surveys, and I'll drill into annual business survey. And the company summary is a good high-level starting point for the annual business survey. So here I have my selections, NAICS code, geography, and survey. We'll go ahead and click search in the lower right, and tables at the top. There are 31 results that appear. The most recent data will be provided at the top, and you'll want to take a moment to read the table titles very carefully and then pay attention to the layout of the table itself. So I want businesses by veteran status. In looking at the table title, the first one provides statistics for employer firms by sex. The second one is by ethnicity. Third is by race. And then the fourth one, AB00 MYCSA01D, provides statistics for employer firms by veteran status. So this is the breakout that I'm interested in looking at. So now that I've clicked into the table, let's take a look at the right side of my screen. I see a variety of columns that are left aligned. These are the dimensions, and each unique combination gives me a data row. And the right-hand side of this table provides the total number of firms, sales, employees, etc. All right, so I can see that each NAICS code has up to 6 data rows, and I'll want to investigate why that's the case. As I scroll to the right, once you get to this meaning of veteran code column, you start to see differences. So it provides data for total businesses without regard to whether the business is veteran or non-veteran. Then we get the veteran-owned businesses and a few other categories. For my analysis, I'm interested in looking at veteran-owned businesses across the different NAICS codes in New York. So I'll want to filter this column. Remember, we did this in our last example. Hover over the column header, click the 3 horizontal bars, the filter icon, and then use the checkboxes to keep whichever options that you're interested. So once I click apply, it is going to reduce this from 125 rows down to 21 rows. So I get 1 row for each NAICS industry code and the geography I selected, which was New York. Again, as I scroll to the right, I'll lose the context for what this data represents. So I will choose which options to pin. I know that all of the data are for New York. So in this case, I'm going to pin the NAICS codes to the left side of my screen. And I'll go ahead and choose the meaning column as well. So now as I scroll to the right, I can see the number of employer firms, and I can click these to sort them in ascending, descending order. So kind of interesting, with just those few clicks, I can start to see in New York that the most number of employer firms that are veteran owned are in the construction industry, followed by professional scientific and technical services, retail trade, real estate, etc. Now, I wanted to show a couple additional features before we go back to the slides, and that's how to save the results. If you're looking at a table, there are two primary ways to export the data: Excel and zip. So if you want the output to look exactly as what you're seeing on screen, you'll click the Excel button. This is a very readable file, so once you open it, it will be in the downloads for whatever browser you're using. There's an information tab that has lots of details about the context of what you're looking at in the notes, and then the data tab. So this is exactly what we were seeing on screen, and notice that it has even included our customizations we made to only show the veteran data and the sort that we did by doing highest to lowest. Another file format, if you're interested in working with the data, the zip file format is going to give you machine readable data. You'll follow the prompts to open up this zip file, and we'll give it a second to load. Within the zip folder, there will be three options. You'll want to choose the one that ends in -data. That will give you all of the data and the labels in one file. So it's going to look more or less pretty similarly when you're working with these economic tables, but this will have all of the data. And as you scroll right from left or left to right, each individual geography will have its own code as well as the NAICS code. And then the last way that you can save the results is through the share button. So this share button exists on our maps, and you can always copy the URL from the address bar as well. Once you click share, it will generate the URL. It's the same as what's in our address bar, as well as some links on social media. Once you open up that link, you can paste it into your web browser, and it's going to take you back to the same table selection with all of our filters and geography applied. All right, so moving back here to wrap up with some additional details, I mentioned you always want to add non-employer statistics data to the other data sources if you want a complete picture of businesses. If you're looking at adding non-employer statistics to the annual business survey data, you would want to make sure to select the non-employer statistics by demographics filter. Couple of additional common questions that we get as folks are working with economic data. One is, what if I get this table is too large to display message? This does happen quite often with economic data sets, and sometimes users miss this option at the bottom that says open the table. It's a clickable link. This message is just giving you a warning that it may have a long load time, but it doesn't mean that the table can't be displayed on your screen. So when you're ready to commit to a certain table, go ahead and click that link and see the data. Now, if you get a data not available message, that can occur for some different reasons. Typically, this happens when you've applied so many custom filters to adjust which options are displayed from the columns that it results in 0 data rows for your table. So to get past this message, you would want to consider using higher level geographies, NAICS codes, or apply fewer filters to the columns that you want to remain in view. Some additional information as you're working with different economic data sets. My colleague put together this helpful list of web links to census.gov, where you can learn more about each of these individual data sets, as well as contact information for each of the data sets. So again, these are for data questions and not for survey respondents. And if you have questions about the data, we would recommend using this contact information on the slide in the table. If you have questions about navigating to the data or using data.census.gov in the API, you'd want to direct those directly to our team at census.data@census.gov. You can also access that email address by clicking the feedback link directly below the single search bar. And again, we answer data questions and welcome comments on ways we can make the website easier for you to access. You can also scan in the upper right this QR code. This will allow you to sign up for email subscriptions, including our monthly newsletter that allows you to stay up to date on the latest data releases, educational opportunities, and system enhancements to help you make the most of data.census.gov. And then I also want to put a plug in for getting hands-on practice. So I showed a live demonstration today. You have the opportunity to join our workshops free of charge. They're anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length, and my colleagues will show demonstrations, but also give you hands-on opportunities to practice individual exercises working on the site. You'll come back together and work through those together once you've had some time on your own to solve them. And we offer them monthly on a variety of different topics. So for data.census.gov, there's basic, advanced, and mapping. We also have one on the microdata access tool to create custom tables. We have one on basics of using the Census Application Programming Interface or API. Last month, we released a new one, Geography Essentials for Beginners. And if you check back on this page in the coming months, you'll also see 2 new ones that we're planning for the American Community Survey workshop on data.census.gov and one on economic data. So if you'd like the hands-on practice for what we learned and showed today, do check back on this page for a future workshop. And with that, I will turn it over to Deb as we transition to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson. So in a few moments, we will start going over some of the questions that were submitted through the Q&A panel. So if you still have a question on searching for economic data on data.census.gov, please feel free to submit that now. But before we dive into your questions, I want to let you know that we have set up a quick evaluation survey, and that will pop up on your screen when you exit WebEx. So when you see that survey window, please take a moment to share your thoughts with us. We would love to hear what worked well, what we could do better, and especially if there are any other topics that you are interested in learning about in future webinars. Now, if you have any questions remaining after our session concludes, or if you would simply prefer to email us your question, feel free to reach out to any of the email inboxes that are listed here. If you are a member of the media, you can contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov. And for general data.census.gov questions from the public or for training requests, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. All right. So, and we can leave this slide up while we go through the Q&A. So now we can go ahead and transition over to the question and answer session. Tyson, we did receive some great questions through the Q&A panel. Some of them may not have been necessarily within the scope of what we were covering today, but we do have at least 1 or 2 that we can go over. So if you're ready, our first question reads, is there anywhere on data.census.gov that I can find a list of all the data sets that are available at a city level?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So one of the things that you can do, I mentioned how the filters build off of each other. So I'll go back to the live site here and go to the advanced search panel. So depending on, you would select either place or economic place first. If you want to access economic place, you would choose under all geographies. You'll see I've mentioned 240 plus different levels of geography to choose, and economic place is one of them. I'm going to use that for this example, but you could certainly use any. geography. And once you make a selection and look to the left, it will show you the different surveys and census that are available. So I know this isn't all in one list, but it is an option for you to explore what's available on our site once you've made a geography selection. So hopefully that helps get you started in answering the question and understanding which data sets are available for a particular level of geography. Again, you can use the filter panel, and the key would be to choose just one level at a time and then look on the left for the surveys.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson, and thank you for that question. Our next question reads, how can I see what geography is available for each NAICS code? For instance, 6244, I don't think there is a county level data available.
So on a high level, you could select the NAICS code first and then go to the geography and see which level of geography populates based on the NAICS code. Typically, it's down to the NAICS code level. So for instance, 6244, that's an example of a 4-digit NAICS code. You would tend to see fewer levels of geography potentially available as you select more detailed NAICS codes like 4, 5, or 6 digits compared to higher level NAICS codes like 2 or 3 digits. I'm not aware of a particular resource that lists this out, but there could be one that exists. So if you want to write in your question, you might be able to explore on the census webpage or connect you with the subject matter experts to see if there's any, kind of high level resource that we may be missing. But as far as using the site itself, you could certainly do very similar to what I mentioned earlier by selecting your NAICS code first and then going to the geography level. And specifically, I showed in the beginning that you would want to click the summary level tab. So I'll show it here one more time, and I'll just go ahead and walk through really quickly. 6244, child daycare services. And then under all geographies, you'll click summary levels, and then this would show you the levels of geography that have selections with the NAICS code. So if you're still having trouble after this, feel free to write us in and we can investigate more.
All right. Thank you so much, Tyson, and thank you for that question. So it looks like those are all of the questions that we received at this time that, again, were within scope of what we were covering today. If we did not address your question, maybe this was the reason why, but regardless, we do encourage you to send us an email at census.data@census.gov with your question. We would still love to help you answer whatever question you may have offline. So please don't be discouraged. Send us that question in and we'd be happy to help you. All right. And with that, Tyson, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you for final thoughts. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for your questions.
Awesome. I appreciate it. I wanted to also mention here that we have multiple ways to stay connected after this webinar. One is the resources page. When you click the help button on the landing page of data.census.gov or scan the QR code here, it will take you to the resources page for data.census.gov. We have a whole suite of educational materials to help you learn more, including answers to FAQs, PDFs with step-by-step instructions, recorded webinars, and short video tutorials. So do know that there's a wealth of educational information waiting for you to use. We also, again, list our feedback and data user email address, census.data@census.gov. And if you'd like a training request, if you're a national organization, you can reach out to sed.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. We do training on data.census.gov, the API, and the microdata access tool. And in addition to that, for local organizations, we also have data dissemination specialists located throughout the country. They take data requests and they specialize in everything related to the Census Bureau, not just data.census.gov. So there certainly is a data dissemination specialist assigned to your state, and you can request a training free of charge at census.askdata@census.gov or calling 1-844-ASK-DATA. These folks also help host the webinar today and Stand Up Census Academy. Wanted to thank you all again for joining us today. We encourage you again to reach out to us and look forward to hearing from you and hope to see you on additional training. Thanks so much.
That concludes today's session. You may disconnect at this time. Have a great afternoon, everyone.